everyone here heard of CHESED Hospital, one of the most famous hospitals to Jews, and certainly if you live in Israel and Yerushalayim, CHESED is the hospital, and we're very fortunate to have with us today Mr. Paul Jesser and Ms. Weinstein, representing the American Friends of CHESED Hospital in Yerushalayim, who made this event today, and I brought our special speaker to Los Angeles, and specifically here to Yeshivat Yavneh. So we thank them, and we thank CHESED Hospital for making this opportunity available to us. Mrs. Deborah Applebaum is our special speaker today. She grew up in America, in Cleveland, received various master's degrees from Case Western University to University of Haifa, and right now spends a lot of her free time in Israel as a docent in the Israel Museum, the Bible Lands Museum, the Rockefeller Museum, and enjoys digging in Ir David Archaeological Park. And 8th grade will, Mirza Hashem, visit Ir David when you go there later this year. A day in Mrs. Applebaum's life that changed her life and touched the life of Jews all over the world was September 9th, 2003, when Rabbi Dr. David Applebaum, who was Mrs. Applebaum's husband, and her daughter Nava were unfortunately killed by a terrorist bomber in Israel the evening before that Nava was to be married. That story shook Jews wherever they are to the core, and it's something we all have had to move on, and we're very honored and inspired by Mrs. Applebaum and the strength and courage that she showed after that dreadful day. And we're very happy to have her here with us today, speaking to us about Chesed, specifically Chesed in Tanakh. Chesed is a topic we speak about frequently here in Yavneh, and so I think you'll find the message very inspiring. Please give a hand to Mrs. Applebaum.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And before we begin, I just would like to present to the school, to the library. I know you mentioned you don't have blackboards. Do you still use libraries?
Yes, library.
Okay, great. Okay, I just wanted to present two books to the library. Sorry, I had to ask the question there. So two books. One book was, it's called Ve'etcha Nava Kodesh. This was a book that was put out by my daughter Nava's friends a year after she was killed. And it has to do, a lot of it has to do with marriage and wedding, but the second half of it has to do with a lot of her chesed projects when she was a madricha in Ezra in her youth movement, and then she did her first year of Sherut Lumi in an institution called Tapiot in Hadera, and then she did her second year of Sherut Lumi National Service Zecher Menachem, working with children with cancer. So this one book I'd like to present, and the other book is one that I put out a few years later. It's called David Avdi, and it's a book really, as much as I try to have David do the talking in terms of some of the articles that he wrote about halacha and fuah, and a little bit about his biography, and so this is told that the 8th grade is going to be doing a chesed project, right? They're going to be going to Israel. The 8th grade sitting in a certain place, and they're going to be also in CHESED. So can someone volunteer and just tell me what you in the red, what are you going to be doing, and what are you going to be doing exactly? What's your project? You don't know. Oh, it hasn't been determined yet. Okay, fine. Okay, do we have any?
We're just coordinating.
Are you coordinating? Okay, so you give me, okay. So since you are going to be involved in some kind of a chesed project, then I thought it's appropriate that we talk about chesed. And I just want to mention, just kind of by the way, is that when I graduated 11th grade, it was the year it was after the 1973 war. I also volunteered in Shari Tzedek. At the time, Shari Tzedek was in Rachov Yafo, and I was in charge of the day hospital. And so it sounds like a great idea, and I hope that you will find it very fulfilling. So I thought then that it's appropriate that we talk a little bit about chesed. Now, the idea of chesed, of kindness to your fellow man, is of course central in Yahadut, and in the Mishnah in Avot, we read that according to Shimon HaTzadik, Gemilot Chasodim is one of the 3 pillars upon which the world rests, upon which Judaism rests, together with Torah and Avodah. Chesed is also one of the attributes, it's one of the characteristics of God, of Hashem, and we want to imitate Hashem. And so we do this by undertaking all kinds of acts of chesed that emanate, or we do this by doing all kinds of acts, all kinds of mitzvot that emanate from chesed. All right, so for example, maybe give me some examples of things mitzvot that we do that are based on chesed. Okay, charity. Okay. Okay, what else? I'm sorry? Kibbud of aim, okay. We're going to define chesed very broadly, okay? Let's see, what about here? Anyone? Kibbud? Brachim habayim, okay. It's welcoming guests. What else?
Visit a sick person.
Okay, good. What else? Other examples? Okay, yeah, go ahead. Talk a little louder, please. Hachnesed orchim, excellent, yes. What else? Good. Any other examples? Okay, that's fine. Now in Chazal, we find, we read all kinds of ideas and sayings that have to do with the importance and the impact and the power and the rewards of chesed. And so today what I'd like to do is, just for the short time that we have together, is to, looking at chesed from a different point of view, and this is more from the text. Now, what we don't, some of you have a chumash in front of you, and we're going to be focusing. Okay, so meanwhile, just hold it, and I'll tell you in a minute when to open it up. Okay, first of all, so in the Torah, we're going to find lots of references to chesed. Of course, there are the mitzvot that are based on chesed. Some of the things you talked about. There's other examples, lechet and shichacham, peah, right? These are some other examples. But we're not going to talk about that now. We're now going to talk about individuals that do acts of kindness in a very general sense in the Torah. Now, who can, just without looking, who can just give me examples of people in the Torah that do acts of kindness? Avraham, good. Yeah. Okay, good. Talk about. I'm sorry? Yes. Who else?
Asa.
Yes, excellent. Very, yes. But what does Asa do? Right. Right.
The Mitzrim, they said Hashem is the righteous one when they died. When they were being killed in the Yam Suf, they said Hashem is the righteous one.
Okay. I don't know if it's maybe chesed, but it's a good thing. Okay. You have to heard you. Wait a second. I'm sorry. What chesed? I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know if we call it chesed, but that's really taking it a little. Chana, what chesed does Chana do? You mean the Chana from the story of Maccabi? Not exactly chesed, but she's a very important lady, does good things, but not exactly chesed. You in the back. Yeah, you. Talk loud. Rachel Imenu, yes. Right, what chesed does she do? Right, very good. And your neighbor?
Deborah, when she goes to sit outside the tent so that even if her husband comes home, the other Jewish men did ask her questions.
Okay. Right. And let's see, we'll just take 2 more. What does Yitzchak do? He's a good guy. Okay, but yeah, he's a good guy. I don't know. I don't know if he's gonna have chesed unless we do one more.
She had her children, and the other wife that was married, Elkanah, her children was dying. She prayed that her children wouldn't die anymore, even though that she did wrong to her.
Okay. Okay. So you guys know. Okay, very good. What you said correct, and there's other. Yeah. Okay, last one.
Noah. There's Noah. He saved Og.
Would Noah say too?
Og, like he let Og live.
Okay, but the Torah doesn't say that.
Is that
Oh, I mean, you. Okay. I think Noah saves Og, or does Og save?
no? I think Noah saved.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll move on, and then we'll hear from you again. Okay. So. Okay, very good. And we can add to that the Shunamit, and we have other examples that we can certainly add to your examples. We have Elisha, Ovadia, the one who he feeds the Kohanim the time of Izebel. I want to focus on three stations in the Tanakh of where we have a concentration of chesed. The first one of you mentioned is Avraham. Okay, so Avraham does lots of chesed, and of course he's considered the epitome of chesed, right? Whereas Yaakov is the symbol of Emet and Yitzchak is the symbol of Gvura, Avraham is a symbol of Chesed, and it's in his zchut that we are referred to as his children, and we are Baishanim, Rachmanim, and Gomli Chasadim. So, what are some of the examples of specifically what does Avraham do that we see that he does lots of Chesed? Right, good. Chachnasas Orchim. I'm sorry. What else? Where else do we see that he
Doesn't save Lot.
He saves Lot, and he takes care of Lot. Lot is his nephew, right? He lets the malachim come in. Okay, right? Something other than Lachnas Orchim? He tried to save Stillman. He had that whole argument with God, right?
He put muzzles on his camel, on his animals, so they don't eat from other people's crops.
Okay. All right. So these are some examples by Abraham, and we know that he was so it's become such a symbol of Chesed that it also influenced the people around him. And we even mentioned it before. People mentioned two people that were very close to him that seemed to have been influenced by his Achnasas Orchim. One would be Lot, and we saw that. When do we see this? Right, very good. And who else is very close to Abraham and we see that influenced him? Right, and how do we see that? How do we see that? Where do we read about Eliezer that we see that he also was somehow connected? I'm sorry, what? He tries to find a wife. Go ahead.
He gave everyone presents.
Oh, but what else?
He went with Avram to get Lot out of the war.
Right, to find. Okay. All right. He was one of his chanichav. Okay. But remember when Eliezer goes to try to find a wife, he prays to Hashem and he thanks Hashem, that he'll find the wife, and he uses the word chesed. And what is the criteria that Eliezer uses in trying to find a wife for Yitzchak? It's the characteristic of chesed, right? The person the woman, the girl that's going to draw water for the camels, and also for him, that'll be the sign. So he uses chesed as his criteria for finding a wife for Yitzchak. Now, pretend we had a blackboard here, and so we have Avraham. That's the first station. Now let's skip over to Ruth, okay? And it's gonna to the Migdat Ruth, and whoever has in front of you Tanakh, let's try to open it up to Megillat Ruth. in Medrash Rabbah, in Ruth Rabbah, we read the following statement. Amar Rab Zeira, Megillah zu ein ba lo tuma v'lo tahara, lo isur v'lo heter, v'lama nichtava, lamdacha kama schar tov v'gom lechasadim. Then the reason why the Megillah is written is not because it deals with laws of cleanliness or not cleanliness, or because of questions of what's permitted and what's forbidden. The reason why it was written is to teach us the reward for those that exercise chesed, that exercise loving kindness. Now, Reb Zeira's statement is not meant to just explain why Megillat Ruth was written, why it's one of the 24 books of the Tanakh, but Rabbi Zeira is commenting on what is the mahut, what is the essence of Ruth. And according to Rabbi Zeira, the essence of Ruth is chesed. Now, first of all, why is that? First of all, the word chesed is mentioned 3 times in Megillat Ruth. Okay, who's going to find me where are the 3 times that the word chesed is written? Okay? It would be who can find for me the first place where it's going to be mentioned? Go ahead. I'm sorry? Pasuk Chet. Okay, you want to read it? You're right. Read it. Loud. Chesed, right. Go ahead. Kasher. Go ahead. Retain her. Okay, fine. Okay, so who here is doing the chesed? Who does the chesed here? You're all familiar with the story of Ruth? Yes? Okay. So who is doing the chesed here? The chesed is, Naomi says that Hashem should continue to do chesed. Ruth is talking to, Naomi is talking to Ruth and Ophrah, the 2 daughter-in-laws. The 2 daughters-in-laws, or Pop, and that because of the chesed that they did. And what is the chesed that they did? It's the chesed of Im HaMeitim. That's the chesed shel emet. In other words, when when Ruth and the daughter-in-law, they were all living, remember they left Eretz Yisrael because of a Ra'av, they come to Moab, and the sons, their husbands die. And so the chesed shel emet here is the chesed that was done to the burying of their husbands. And here we have Ruth and Naomi. We have here, Ruth and her sister are now, not her sister. We have Ruth. We have 2 daughter-in-laws are coming from Moab, and they are accompanying Naomi back to Eretz Yisrael. They heard that the Rav is over. Okay, so here we have a chesed that's done by Hashem, and we have the chesed that's done by the 2 daughter-in-laws. What's the other place that we have chesed?
Perik Gimel Pasuk Yud.
Perik Gimel Pasuk Yud. What does it say?
Vayomer Brucha at Hashem Biti Haytevech Chazkeh Ahacharon Min Rishonim Ledelti Lechem Acharei Bechurim Im Dal Ve'im Ashir.
Okay, right. And here the chesed is talking about Ruth. What's the chesed? The chesed is that, or maybe someone wants to tell me what the chesed is? The chesed that she's coming, don't forget that we have a situation here where we have Ruth, who was, according to the Medrash, she was the granddaughter of the king of Moab, of Eglon. And here she is leaving a possibility of getting married to someone in Moab, and she's going to Eretz Yisrael where there's nothing to eat, and she's hoping to try to find a husband maybe so that she'll remarry and that she can carry on the name of her husband that died. And she's also Moabiyah. The Tuvim always tell us she's a Moabiyah. And you have to remember that the law, the Torah says that you're not allowed to marry someone who's a Moabiyah, who was from Moab, right? And it wasn't yet clear that you're allowed to marry Moabiyah, but not a Moab. So that her whole status, her whole halachic status as being Jewish is also here, it's questionable. So that she doesn't have a lot going for her, and it'd be a lot better off if she would just stay in Moab, but yet she doesn't do that. She goes, nevertheless, to accompany her mother-in-law to Eretz Yisrael. So that's the chesed, the great chesed here. And what's the last time, the 3rd time that we have chesed? Perik? We did that one. What's the 3rd, the last time? We did that one.
No, we didn't.
We didn't do Perik, we didn't do Perik? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you're Bet and Pasuk, Bet and Chaf. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead and read it. Right, okay, and this is the second time, and it's actually a very important time. It's a critical time here where we have the whole story begins to change pace, and we have here the beginning of the whole plan of Naomi's plan. So basically we have the word chesed is mentioned in the story of Ruth 3 times, in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. But not only that, but the type of chesed that we're talking about in the story of Ruth is unusual, because it's not just a question of a chesed being done here, and a little chesed shel emet, and there's leket and the shichacha. The chesed that is done here, by the way, all of the main characters do chesed. We're talking about not only Hashem, but also Ruth and Naomi and Boaz and the Goel. Everyone does chesed, but it's a chesed that envelops, it totally accompanies these main characters. For example, if we're talking about Ruth, as we said before, and by the way, the wording of the Torah is such that it says that it says V'Ruth davka bo. It's ba. It's as if the kindness sticks to her. She was always doing chesed, even when she wasn't with her mother-in-law, with Naomi, when she's out in the fields. She remembers her. She's always doing chesed, and that's a characteristic. And it's very interesting also is that the chesed is emphasized by using a foil. You know what a foil is? Have you learned that in literature? When you have another character who works as a kind of who works in contrast. So here we have a story where we have 2 daughter-in-laws, right? We have Ruth, and we have the 2 daughter-in-laws who are leaving Moab. And remember the names of the 2 daughter-in-laws? What are the names?
Naomi. Oh, wait, never mind.
There's Ruth and Orpah. Okay, so they're both accompanying their mother-in-law to Eretz Yisrael. And so they both are doing big chesed. And Naomi convinces Orpah to go back to Moab. But Ruth decides to stay. So Orpah is also good. She also does chesed. Except we see the difference between whereas Orpah decides to go back, Ruth decides to stay with Naomi. So by having this contrast of the 2, it only emphasizes the chesed of Naomi, the chesed of Ruth. And the same thing with Boaz. Boaz also, the chesed that he does is ifnei mishor tadin. Because the chesed that you do for a poor person in those days, you would leave wheat or whatever you're harvesting. If you forgot it, you wouldn't pick it up, and you would leave it for the person who was an ani, or that was a ger, or that was an almanah. In this case, she was all 3. And not only does Boaz leave in the fields all these things for Ruth, but he also gives her all kinds of other things and additional food to take back. And there's also there is a mitzvah of yibum. Are you familiar with the mitzvah of yibum? Yes, who's going to tell me what is the mitzvah of yibum?
Let's say someone died,
Yeah.
married without kids.
Right.
So there's a mitzvah for the brother of the person who died to
Right.
marry his brother's wife.
Right, exactly. And that's a classic example of yibum. And so, but here we can't have that yibum because the 2 brothers that died, there was no other brother. But we know that in those days that the yibum was a little bit more, was widened a little bit, and they would also, someone who was a close member of the family would also marry the widow to try to continue the name of the husband. And so what we have here is an example of 2 people that were potential people to do the yibum. We have this Goel and we have Boaz. And the Goel is willing to do it, right? He's willing to, we have 2 kinds of Goel, we have 2 kinds of yibum, there's 2 kinds of Geula. There's Geula of the land, and there's Geula of actually marrying someone. Geula of the land, let's say Naomi had land, and she has no one to work the land, so she's going to sell it, but she doesn't want to sell it to anybody, otherwise the family will lose the land. And to lose land in Eretz Yisrael was very important to have the land. So a member of the family would buy the land from her. That's one kind of, it's called gulat of adamah. But there's also the other kind of geulah, what we call yibum, where someone would actually marry, have another wife, would marry the person, the woman, and then the children would carry the name of the husband. So we have this person, his name is the Goel. We don't know what his name is. The Chazal says his name was Tov. He is willing to be Goel the Adamah, but he's not being willing to Goel to marry Ruth for all kinds of reasons. For example, also the halachic problem with her status. So, in the contrast to the Goel, who also does chesed, because he's willing to be Goel the Adamah, we have Boaz, who although he's very old, although the status of Moab Moabiyah was not yet clear, he is willing to do that, and he's willing to marry Ruth so that the family the name can continue. And so here we have another example of a chesed, which is unusual. It's lifnei meshurat hadin in many ways, and this is typical of the kind of chesed that we find in the Megillah of Ruth. And these are some of the examples. I'm not gonna go on, but this is what's unique to the story of Ruth. And so Ruth's reward is that she will marry, she has a child, and she's going to live happily ever after. And she not only will rehabilitate a whole family in Yehuda, but also a whole dynasty is going to be created, right? Because she has a son, Oved will have Yishai, and Yishai is going to have David. Now the third spot in the Torah that I want to focus on, but just in short, is in Shmuel. And these are some of the stories that are relating to David HaMelech, okay? Immediately upon when King David, when David HaMelech becomes king, first he's a king of Melech Shevet Yehuda for 7 years, and he's in Hebron. And the first thing that he does is that he thanks the people of Yavesh Gilad, the people that live now what's today the Golan, and he thanks them and he blesses them and he praises them for their act of chesed, the highest form of chesed. Does anyone know what the people of Yavesh Gilad do? I'm sorry? Oh, what do the people of Yavesh Gilad?
They bury Shaul
Mm-hmm.
on the battlefield.
Right. Good, great. Okay, so they risk their lives to bury Shaul and his sons, Yonatan. They die on the battlefield in the Gilboa, and they risk their lives to save him. It uses again Chesed Shel Emet, which is a very high form of Chesed. And this is one of the first things that he does, is that he praises them, and interestingly he uses the same words that Naomi uses, very similar words that Naomi uses in praising Ruth. He says, Bruchim atem la'Hashem asher asitem hachesed hazeh im adonechem Shaul v'tiperu oto ve'ata yas Hashem imachem chesed ve'emet v'gam anochi e'aseh etchem hatova hazot. Okay? And now we read further on about David HaMelech is his act of kindness towards Yehonatan. Yehonatan is the son of Shaul. He was David's best friend. And we read how he looks out for Yonatan's children, right? Remember, he finds out that he has a son named Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth is lame, and when he finds out that there's still a remnant of Yonatan, he asks that he be brought to his palace, and for the rest of his life, Mephibosheth and his family is going to live by David, and he's going to be eating at his table, okay, for the rest of his life. And we also again have mention of the word chesed. V'yomar HaMelech ha'efes od ishi lebeit Shaul ve'aseh imo chesed Elokim ve'ishafti lecha et kol sadeh Shaul avicha v'ata tochal lechem al shulchani tamid. Okay. And then again we will find at the end of his life, when he gives over to his son Shlomo his will and testament, he instructs him how to act towards different people, towards specific people. And one of them is Barzillai HaGiladi. Does anyone know what Barzillai HaGiladi does? What does Barzillai do? You don't know. Okay, Barzillai HaGiladi, when David HaMelech has to run out of Yerushalayim because Avshalom leads a rebellion against him, Barzillai greets him with food. And because of that chesed, Shlomo was instructed for his children, Taseh chesed v'hayu ba'ochlei shulchanecha ki kein kavu alai. Again, that for the rest of their life, they're going to be eating by the table of David HaMelech. So here are just a few examples, and there are others, not to mention, of course, references in the Tehillim of Chesed that illustrate the importance and the value that David placed on Chesed and how it was a guiding principle throughout his reign. And this is unique in all the books of the Nevi'im, that we have such a concentration of the use of Chesed around a particular person in many different contexts. And in the above cases, by the way, David does not initiate the Chesed, right? In all the cases I mentioned to you before about David, he's only repaying Chesed. But that too is a definition of chesed. We say gomlei chasadim, because gomlei means to repay your chesed. That's why it's always in the plural, because it's a paying back. And so we have the cycle of chesed that causes another chesed that causes another chesed. So when Hashem promises David HaMelech that he will establish a dynasty that's going to last for some 400 years, and that this dynasty is going to be Lenetzach. What does it mean, Lenetzach? It means that it'll be the vehicle for bringing the Mashiach. Then this also is referred to as a chesed. This payback is referred to as a chesed. Hashem says, "V'chazdi lo yasur mimenu v'ne'eman beitcha u'malchatcha ad olam." And no doubt that this midah of chesed that is associated with David HaMelech's rule and with his malchut Beit David was nurtured from his great-grandmother Ruth. And if we go back to Reb Zeira's statement that the whole essence of Megillat Ruth is to teach the reward of chesed, then we see an example of this, because not only is David HaMelech rewarded with the promise of chesed, of eternal malchut, for his repaying of chesed, but this nachat is also an extension of Ruth, right? Ruth, who is his great-grandmother, who is rewarded for her chesed. And if we go back even further, and if I had this board, we would see, if we go back to Avraham, then we see that both from David HaMelech and from Boaz, we have also this gene that goes back to Avram Avinu, the gene of chesed that we saw in Avram Avinu. And if we also have to remember, we talked about the influence of Abraham on his krovim, and one of his krovim was Lot. And we know that who comes from Lot. Remember, we said Avram Avinu. We said we have an influence of Eliezer, and we have the influence on his nephew Lot. Lot is the forefather of Moab, and Ruth comes from Moab. And so, even though this gene was sort of dormant for many, many centuries, but it seems that when Boaz marries Ruth, it's sort of reactivated, and that David HaMelech is getting this all in a double dosage. And so we talked about this chain. So you, all of you in general, and especially you girls is it you girls and guys or just girls? You kids are going to be going to Israel and are going to be volunteering. You are also a part of this illustrious chain of Godlei Chasadim. And the chesed that you do and will continue to do in the future will, by definition, have a kind of a rippling effect, and will cause you and those that you reach out to in turn do many more acts of chesed. And by helping others, you will also become better people, and will help to contribute to bring the geula, which is the ultimate reward for Gomei Chasadim.